Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Good evening, folks, and welcome to Alien Addict. I have not got my cap tonight. It's somewhere. One of my children hid it. How are we all diddling on this fine and very blue evening? Because it is a blue evening because we got not because of the swearing and the cursing, whatever you guys call it, but because we're going to talk a bit of the old blue beam. And it's a weird one this evening because I don't know if you remember the last show, but Black Star Paranormal, he was speaking about some of his friends that are doing things for NASA. Well, we actually have a NASA guy below, and I'm going to bring him up in a second, right after we've brought my good blue buddy.
Hi.
Mate, I'm loving how you've got the blueness.
Themed it for this, and I quite like blue, so.
And your new drums.
And new drums.
You just wanted to show us your drums.
There's drums there. I can kind of use those. There's a piano there. I can't use that.
Rich.
Hey.
That now has a UFO channel.
Yeah.
That is in the description, people. Go check it out. And you don't have an intro. You've got more than just an intro video out now as well. It was a great video at that.
Thank you.
Black Star Paranormal.
Hello.
Where's the logo? You don't even have a logo. You don't even have no face, no logo, nothing.
Yeah, not my normal setup this time. Still on vacation.
You are still on vacation, but you are going to be back in the studio soon, and we'll have you on when you've got all your setup.
Indeed.
With your ridiculously good audio. And the most hated man in ufology. I didn't want him on tonight. He forced his way in. But it's going to destroy me. Oh, he's quickly got rid of his face. Yeah. Rich.
Yeah. Oh, hey.
There you are.
I'm not the most hated. Second
most hated person in ufology.
Yeah. Who's most?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's a tough mountain.
I don't know. Special guest tonight, boys. Special guest. We got the NASA guy.
Hey,
everybody.
James Owens, welcome to the show.
Long and prosper.
You chose a beauty to come on to tonight. You know, it's Project Bluebeam.
Right.
So a little bit first, a little introduction from yourself. So what actually do you do for NASA?
Design engineering. So I've been mostly mechanical design, sometimes integration, primarily launch vehicles, but I worked on International Space Station, Ares 1, which got canceled, and now currently on SLS. I'm also working part-time on lunar habitat design and Mars transit habitat design. So getting a little bit of everything in there. Did a nuclear spacecraft some years ago that was supposed to go around and orbit Jupiter. Got to work on that for a while. That never actually occurred. Now they're getting much more serious about nuclear spacecraft, though. So we'll see what happens.
How does one get into the whole NASA thing? You know?
Well, for me, I got a degree in aerospace engineering because it was kind of what I always wanted to do. You know, Star Trek fan from birth, probably. And I always wanted to build spaceships. So I got incredibly lucky when I came out of college. There was no jobs, and I delivered pizza for a year and a half. And my wife kind of nudged me into putting out more resumes than I had. And I 328 resumes later, got a job at McDonnell Douglas, which doesn't exist anymore, but it's part of Boeing now. And working on the International Space Station. So I did that for a few years, and then got over at Marshall Space Flight Center with a NASA support contract. So,
right. So you've got to have a good head on your shoulders to do this.
Yeah,
to do the NASA.
Yeah, I guess so.
And they let you come on conspiracy shows.
Well, the disclaimer: I'm representing myself and not NASA in any way. So all my opinions are my own, and that's all there is to it.
There you go. I like that. A NASA guy with huge testicles.
I did get a chance to speak at Dragon Con. We have a space track at Dragon Con. I've done that a couple of years and done some universities and other things. So,
well, enough of me. I'm sure the panel's got, plenty of questions for you. We definitely going to get onto the blue beam because I want to ask. There's a lot you could probably add to the table and maybe disprove when it comes to that. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to ask a NASA guy about UFOs.
All right, I'm game.
Let's start with the most hated man in
No,
ufology. Come on, Rich, come on. You're dying to. You've got that.
I don't have any questions yet. There hasn't been any content. Go to Rich, the other Rich. That's the one you mean. Okay.
He's got his hand up. It's so polite.
Yeah. James, nice to meet you. One of the things that we hear about all the time is the performance of the Tic Tac in terms of rapid changing in directions and moving from space to air and underwater back out again. This is what they're talking about, hypersonic velocities. Let's ignore the without sonic booms thing, because we know there's things that try to do that NASA's doing, but
low boom demonstrator. Yeah.
So what crosses my mind is, though, we're talking about the standard of engineering to build an object that would do that kind of thing, the tolerances that are involved and the materials to deal with those kind of stresses. Do we have any materials at the moment or any engineering techniques that would allow a craft to even stand that kind of thing? I mean, I'm not just talking about the thrust or anything like that, but do we have anything? Yeah.
There's a lot of materials out there that are, we're getting better at material science all the time. Some very interesting alloys. We're using a aluminum lithium alloy that's a good bit stronger than a typical aluminum alloy. But I would think for anything like what you're talking about, is we were going to end up with some kind of carbon fiber composites. Those kinds of things have a lot of stress resistance for the weight that you get. So I would think if we had anything that could do what you're talking about, it would be certainly in the carbon fiber type of regime rather than the metallics. Metallics are great if you're trying to dissipate heat, because carbon fiber is terrible at that. But that's why you see the Starship, for instance, the SpaceX Starship is made of stainless steel. Well, that's because it's great at dissipating heat. And that's one thing that's super important for them, because they're reusing that vehicle, go into orbit, coming back down. And that's their plan. And so it's got to be able to withstand a lot of cycling, that thermal between, re-entry heating and that sort of thing. So,
and anything about ceramics or anything like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of ceramics out there. If you haven't looked into aluminum oxynitride, that one's an interesting one. It's transparent, basically transparent aluminum, but it doesn't have the ductility that you think of when you think of a metal. But it is transparent. It's great for bulletproof materials. I could see some. If you wanted to have a transparent structure, that would be one way you could do it. I don't know how easy it is to construct together, because you're basically with that kind of material, you're ended up clamping it or something like that in order to get it into position. So you can't just weld it into a plate, for instance. So there's some processes that would be required. Other ceramics, perhaps there's a great deal of work in ceramics that I don't know much about. So it's quite possible there's a material that could handle that, but
brilliant.
Not directly aware of it.
So what you're saying is that hopefully you're saying is that it could be possible to make a Tic Tac structurally whether we've got the kind of engine or the thrust or whatever we would use to create the lift, that's not available for us, but definitely we could build something that would withstand the pressures.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, it depends on the of course, it depends on how fast you're making that maneuver, how much G, what we call G load that you get on that. And it also depends on the size of the structure. Smaller structures, that's going to be easier to do. You start building something the size of a starship, for instance, then it gets to be, pretty problematic to take that kind of G loading, I would think. But for smaller structures, I don't see why you couldn't.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate that. Cheers.
Yep.
What did you make of the footage, James, that has been out? I mean, you must have seen the Tic Tac footage, heard the Fravors events with the Tic Tacs and what have you. What do you make of all that? The actual footage itself. What did you think of that?
Now, I mean, I've seen the stuff that's been, presented to Congress, for instance, that kind of stuff. And it's just really hard to tell. We're looking at lights move around. It could just be, some kind of, lighting thing. It's really hard to tell from the footage that I've seen anyway. Maybe there's some more out there that I'm not aware of, but it's
so you're not impressed.
There's nothing that makes me jump up and go, "Oh my God, it's really aliens." I can't say that it absolutely can't be, but it's not as compelling as I think it's promising that it's out there in the open. I think that part is really promising. Beyond that, I don't know. They saw something. And I don't doubt that those pilots saw something, but I don't know. I know they don't know what they saw, and I don't know what they saw. So outside of that, it's hard to make a judgment on it.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I don't think anybody can make a judgment on it, but some people do.
Of course.
So the fascinating thing about this at the moment is, we've got Bill Nelson coming on and saying that NASA's coming in and they're going to start evaluating the information that they need to monitor UAP, which is great. He does seem to suggest, though, that this is the first time that they've looked into an identified aerial phenomenon. And there's a lot of people on Twitter at the moment saying that can't be the case. Do you know for a fact whether there has been any efforts by NASA to do this?
Prior to this, I am not aware of any. Now, of course, I wouldn't be. So if they have done it, it's going to be significantly more classified than I would have seen. So that's what you do with classified information. You always you only let need to know people know, right? Mm-hmm. So, and often when you're involved in a classified situation, you don't even have the whole picture. You have a small piece of it, so that if you are compromised for some reason, you can't spill the whole beans, right? So it's possible someone could easily have worked on a project for this and not realize that's what they were doing. So I personally think that that's been limited to Department of Defense because it's easier to have a classified program that people don't talk about at DoD than it is at NASA, because NASA tends to be Freedom of Information Act, open information. All of our reports tend to be published on the NASA Technical Reports server, so anybody can download them. So it's real hard to be tightly classified on the NASA side.
But I mean, if these things are up there and flying around, like if they're real, the NASA must have been picking these things up on like radar or the amount of countless things you see, like anomalies, like if I mean, these hours of YouTube footage, isn't there, of like anomalies in NASA footage? Because I read the same thing Rich did this afternoon, and the first thing I thought was that's like the idea that a park ranger on the Serengeti would suddenly start sort of saying, yeah, we're going to start acknowledging zebras from now on. We've never really looked at them before, but yeah, we're going to acknowledge them as a real thing.
Well, I mean, I know that there are reports from astronauts that have, felt like they had seen things, stuff that didn't really know what they're looking at. Again, we get, in low Earth orbit, you get all sorts of debris. You get ice chunks from all sorts of crazy things that can reflect sunlight. And I'll tell you guys a funny story. When we were putting together the space station, I was on the engineering console on the ground, of course, and we were looking at a cover. They're rings that attach two segments together that have to be perfect in order to form a seal, and in the common berthing mechanism they call it. And so this thing seals the two pressurized elements together, and those have to last for, well, ever since it's been launched, so over 20 years now. So when they're putting these things together, they have to have a thermal standoff time, because since there's no air to regulate the temperature between the two, you want the temperature to equalize between the two sides so that the seal will seat properly. So there's a 4-hour thermal standoff where these things are just sitting facing each other, at a certain distance for 4 hours to allow the radiation to equalize the temperature. During that time, we do a survey of all the pictures that have been taken in that area, just to make sure there's no debris or something else that could be weird about this thing, so they might not mate up properly. Well, one day there were these weird white circles all over one of the rings in 3 of the pictures, just 3, only 3 images. And you got this nice, supposed to be super smooth surface, and it's got all these weird mottled blotches on it. Looks like somebody left bubble wrap on it or something, right? And they went through, what could it be? Is all these things that could have been in the manufacturing process. Could somebody have left bubble wrap on it? Could it be a circular grinding pattern or something that caused corrosion? And it went back and forth for 2 of the 4 hours. And then somebody came up with the idea that, oh, look, this thermal cover that's right next to this, that they have to open up in order for these things to mate up. It's just there for launch, basically. This thermal cover has rivets on it. And the way the sunlight was hitting at just the right angle, it was reflecting off of these rivets onto the surface and creating this strange circular pattern all across the surface. And they managed to convince the management that that's what was going on. It was just this pattern of light, on the surface that caused that. So pretty interesting stuff to me. And the thing sealed fine, and it's never leaked. So I guess that's what it was.
Do you know, there's a funny question here for you.
Okay.
Is there anything that you're forbidden to talk about?
That's an interesting question.
Can you talk about it?
Well, that's a yes or no, isn't it? It's
now,
simple as that.
So I have worked for Department of Energy before too. For a brief stint between NASA and NASA, I worked for about 8 years on a uranium processing facility in Oak Ridge. So I really can't talk about that beyond what's publicly available. So we built equipment that allowed people to handle uranium safely, and I'm really not supposed to go into a whole lot of detail beyond that. But that was a different environment. At NASA, the work that I do is strictly unclassified stuff. So, I mean, I'm not even required to have anything above a basic public trust clearance for the job I do. So,
Right.
Now that being said, I do have, engineering details that are considered trade and arms regulations that I wouldn't be able to discuss in detail, like how an engine is designed, or even the tank pressures we use and mix ratios on engines and things like that would probably be forbidden. Although you could probably get most of it from Wikipedia and other sources. So Encyclopedia Astronautica has a lot of stuff, especially on historical engines, for instance. So it's not exactly classified, but it's,
You don't want the information getting in the wrong hands,
Right. There's $1 million fine involved if if I let ITAR secrets out to an international audience. So
yeah, thanks for that, Jennifer. Great question. I appreciate that. So the show, and I'm sure people are going to break off and ask about other things, but before the show, I spoke to you briefly about Bluebeam. You said you've heard of Blue Book, but you've never heard of Project Bluebeam.
I think I've heard of it, but I don't know any details, so I'll go with that. So my brother's more of a ufologist than I am. So
right. So Project Bluebeam is that if they wanted to, they could fake the coming of Christ or an alien invasion.
I think it's worth noting that Bluebeam was a declassified thing that came out, wasn't it? With where I think the idea was that on foreign countries that the US was involved with, you could project some sort of deity over that area so that was where it sort of came from.
Are they using a microwave projection of some kind?
Yep.
No idea.
I've seen some stuff on basically creating essentially a hologram with microwaves, so using beam interference.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Rich. No, you go, mate.
They were talking. The conspiracy was by Serge Monast. He was the one that brought it to air back in the 1990s, and what he said was that there was Project Bluebeam was between the defense and NASA, and what they would do is NASA would use satellites, drones, etc., to project deities into the sky, and also to transmit into actually directly into people's eardrums, in the languages of in the predominant language of their country, as though their God was speaking to them, and it would be used as a way to bring a country or a nation under control quickly. So that was the conspiracy theory, and it came out a little bit later. They started talking about alien invasion and that kind of thing as well. So the whole idea was it was either going to be used to unite people against an enemy or to bring them under religious control. Yeah.
And Stephen Greer speaks about the false alien invasion a lot.
So now you see where we get the NASA thing in this, and
right.
I'm hoping you can give us your opinion of this.
Well, I'm skeptical on a lot of fronts. I'll start with that. First of all, I'm unaware of any technology that would allow us to just mass broadcast a voice into someone's ear. I mean, obviously, changing it to their language, that's easy, but how do I get it from a satellite to somebody's ear?
We've been doing that on a smaller scale for quite a long time, haven't we? Even back in the early 2000s, I remember there was a TV show. It was something like Ghost Hunters, but it was like one of these History Channel type things. And they had a billboard set up somewhere in a city, and using it was the same sound technology, I think, which turns like the bone in the back of your ear into a speaker. So you're essentially sending it to that to vibrate, and they were sending like ghost moans and voices into people as they walk past this billboard as like an advertising thing, and that was like
but yeah, you're talking about
2001.
subharmonics that can be transmitted through air over short distances. But that is a different technology than being able to do it from a satellite in orbit where there isn't any air. Maybe combined with some kind of ground system, perhaps. But maybe I don't know. That'd be a stretch. A limited area, a small number of people, perhaps. Being able to do like an entire country without significant access to that country to set up the hardware. I don't know. I'm not sure how you would pull that off.
Yep. Very far-fetched. That's what I thought as well.
As far as the holographic technology projecting the image, maybe that's possible. Like I said, I've seen some work in the microwave. You've got invisible beams that beam at each other, but they form an interference pattern at the places where they cross. And so you see that as a visible dot. Because that interference happens to be in our visible frequency that we can see. So, using constructive interference the same way you hear in music, harmonics in music are constructive interferences, right? So, so that's the same idea there with light, but you'd have to have, again, pretty significant amount of power to do this and a fairly decent setup. Whether it could be done from orbit, again, would be questionable because microwaves tend to get filtered out by clouds and water vapor in the air pretty quickly. So that would be pretty tough to do from orbit.
What about laser-induced plasmas?
Maybe. I'm not an expert in that field by any means, but maybe.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Brilliant.
But it's interesting to say maybe with the induced plasmas, because you were talking about the was it you, Rich, that mentioned about the Tic Tac being laser could possibly be laser induced plasmas.
It's one of the things that people have been floating as a possible. So the pilots were saying that they were seeing something. It was white. It was oval stroke Tic Tac shaped, and it moved very, very quickly. Some people are talking about this not being alien of any kind, but perhaps a countermeasure that was involving using laser-induced plasmas, whereby they were seeing something that was under the water, and it was projecting a Tic Tac-like object, and obviously for it to change direction very quickly, all you would need to do is just go boom like that, and if it was the lasers were converged about 2 or 3 miles away, it would move instantaneously very fast, just like the pilot said it was, So
right,
that's what people are talking about.
That's actually halfway plausible. Yeah. I'm not aware of any technology that could, the lasers that could do that at this point. But then again, I wouldn't be, obviously. So that's certainly within the realm of plausibility.
And it might not be lasers; it might be masers as well. Things like that, microwave amplification, etc. Cool.
Can somebody help me with Ginger Steve's beautiful contribution there? Thank you, Ginger Steve. But I'm dyslexic and that is a bit long for me.
With all the releases in the press and the Pentagon slowly releasing footage, guys, is it interdimensional or interstellar, made on Earth or just faked footage? The military is trying to increase funds. What's the things we see?
It's interesting that we mentioned dimensional with a NASA guy, because I want to ask about the dimensional thing. What do you think about that?
Okay,
and the question itself,
right? Well, as far as interdimensional, I think there is a possibility that there are dimensions. Hyperspace, for instance, is one you might consider a dimension. We, to my knowledge, don't have technology to be able to access that. I certainly believe there are dimensions higher than the 3 that we normally exist in, and the time, I guess, the 4 we normally exist in. The trouble is being, limited to our 4 dimensions. You think of a 2-dimensional object. Is it aware that there are 3 dimensions? If there was say a living circle that existed on paper, only in the flat world, could it even perceive something that was in 3D? So I think we're in that situation where I don't believe we can perceive things outside of the 4 dimensions we live in. So
James, as a guy that is a contractor for NASA, you have to be careful when you say the flat world.
Yeah, there is.
I just want to put that out there because they'll eat you alive with the flat Earth community.
No.
For that one,
we've known the Earth was spherical since Eratosthenes, I think. He was able to actually not only know that it was round, but actually measure it within a few hundred meters of the correct diameter. Just using a stick and sunlight. So, yeah, we know it's round. We've known it's round for millennia.
Do you know any flat earthers that work for NASA?
No.
Are they allowed?
I think it'd be a hard sell during an interview.
Because there was a guy who said, we have the technology to take ET home. Where's that home? Is anyone? That's for you. NASA guy.
That's an interesting question.
Can you hear me? Is this thing on?
That was the Lockheed Martin guy, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Paul somebody or other. He was misquoted apparently. But,
He was.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I am not aware of the of that particular quote, but I don't. The closest thing we could do at this point, there's some gravitational acceleration, just by using gravity swing bys of various planets. There's all sorts of crazy ideas on future propulsion. One of them would be, a nuclear electric rocket that you basically have any kind of a reactor on board. Could be fusion, but even if we just limit it to tech we have today, fission, then you would accelerate large molecules like xenon. You strip an electron off of it and accelerate that out the back, and you don't get very much thrust out of doing that, but the long-term acceleration is not terribly limited. So you might be able to get maybe 1/10 of the speed of light or something out of that. And eventually, if we could get to, say, Proxima Centauri, but that would be like a 45-year trip rather than a 4.5-year trip, which light takes 4.5 years roughly to get to Proxima Centauri, or get to us from Proxima Centauri, or vice versa. So wherever ET is from, if it happened to be, say, Proxima B, which we think might actually be habitable, then we're looking at 45-50 years maybe, but we've never actually tried to build anything like that. So
are you familiar with the Oumuamua, the interstellar object?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? Because Avi Loeb, that Harvard professor guy, thinks it might be one of those light sailed using alien ships or something. I mean, do you know any more about that? Was that just a weird rock that had weird, reaction to our sun where it sped up and should have slowed down and vice versa?
I'm of the opinion it's a weird rock that, like you said, that had an odd reaction. I think maybe, volatiles exploding off the surface because I don't know what kind of things you would collect in deep space because vacuum is never a vacuum, right? So if it's been in deep space between solar systems for thousands of years, how much material would have collected on the surface there that's just kind of loosely gathered due to gravity, at the surface. And once it gets into the field of the sunlight, the sun dominates this part of space. I mean, absolutely dominates this part of space. So, if you're looking at it strictly from a gravity vector, it did some unusual things. But if you start thinking about, well, what kind of volatiles were off-gassing off of it, and they wouldn't be visible necessarily to us, so we wouldn't be able to see that, certainly we didn't have enough time to observe it to figure out what kind of mass change might have happened. I think there's a dozen possible explanations along those lines.
But could there be an intelligence behind it, you think, or is it just a rock?
I'm of the opinion it's just a rock. Now, I believe there are. This is going to get philosophical here. I believe there are alien intelligences. I'm a little dubious that they've ever visited us directly. Now, perhaps a probe or something like that you could send long range, maybe. But for whatever reason, we must be on a communications blackout because we have not received radio signals of any kind, which seems like a big oversight if you were looking for other cultures. We've certainly sent out signals toward Alpha Centauri and toward other star systems, the Arecibo code, and so.
But that's if they're using the same technology, advancing at the same rate, maybe, and I mean the odds of that are super slim. Wouldn't you agree with that?
That's true. But we're not just looking in a typical radio frequency. We're looking across the whole spectrum that we know of electromagnetic spectrum, and looking for odd spikes. So, that's what SETI does. And I used to have SETI at home installed on my computer because I'm 100% behind trying to find alien life. But, but on the other hand, it is either they are so far advanced we can't detect them, or they are purposely through some sort of prime directive type setup putting us in a communications blackout zone so we can't detect them, and thereby be altered, have our course of history altered by knowing they exist. That's maybe a plausible solution.
There's many.
But yeah.
I mean, I know that Star Trek, the Prime Directive, but that would make complete sense for any other civilization not to mess with anybody who. Because I would hope if we went out there, we wouldn't do an avatar and just go mine at the shit out of that planet. I would.
Well, let's hope.
We probably would. Let's. I mean, we're humans. We're very selfish creatures.
Says you.
But yeah, but let's face it though, the vast majority of rocks in space are just that. They're dead. There's nothing on them. So why would you go after the one habited planet and strip mine that when you could just go get asteroids that nobody cares about and strip mine the heck out of them and nobody will care. No one will find you. And the gravity well. I mean, the asteroids have virtually no gravity well, so mining them and then bringing the material back here is a much simpler process than trying to get it, say, up off of the moon even or Mars. Mining asteroids is definitely the way to go. So
a suitably advanced race might be able to just collect elements as they come off off exploding stars and things like that. They just need to capture it.
True.
To turn this around into the UFO again, are you familiar with the STS mission where the tether broke off and there were all these things floating around it years ago in the 90s?
Yeah, you're talking about the electrodynamic tether experiment, I think.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
can't remember
yeah,
the exact name of it, but yeah, they were trying to generate electricity by taking a weight on one end across a tether back to the shuttle, and so the idea would be that you have this long electrified cable moving through the magnetic field, and you can use that to generate power, kind of like what we do with a motor or a generator, which is, you move windings through a magnetic field to generate electricity. So same concept.
But those objects, were they ice crystals all around it that kind of looked, I think it was out of focus, but they looked like discs with the little Pac-Man mouth cut out of it, sort of?
Yeah, I've seen the picture, and
Like a pizza.
I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, I would think that the idea of like an electrical discharge would be pretty unusual. But ice, I suppose, could have built up. There's a lot of free floating elements. So one of the things when we with the ISS, we have to deal with free atomic oxygen. So for instance, and atomic oxygen, instead of what we breathe down here is O2. Up there it's just O, and it's much more reactive than just O2. And so it will erode away plastics. Silver turns to oxide, black oxide powder. So we have lots of coatings that have to be put on things, and you can't put any exterior Velcro that's not protected somehow by some beta cloth or whatever. So it's possible there was some kind of chemical reaction that caused some flare ups, especially with that metal as it's expanding and snapping. Could release some energy there. Maybe welded little droplets of metal as they melt and fly out. It's hard to know.
I've just realized I'm probably gonna have to change the thumbnail and the title of the video because which is absolutely fine. But I've got to ask this question because I always hear people saying, "How is so you worked on the ISS?
Uh-huh.
How is that thing still there?" So all the little I mean, you will have a genuine answer for this. So,
okay.
but everybody. So I remember when that little tiny piece of something had hit, and they were doing all that work, and you saw them pulling all the pieces out, try and get that tiny hole on there.
Right.
But a lot of people that disbelieve that this thing is there, which I've got a good friend who's an astronomer that has shown me this thing shooting past the moon within literally a nanosecond. It's there, and he's a great astronomer. He's actually linked in the featured channels. Go check him out, people. But there's a lot of people that think that nobody's up there, and that you guys, well, they're not you, but they're actually underwater. So how would you answer somebody who's engineered the space station when somebody said that thing wouldn't last? It would not last in there. It would get destroyed by little tiny pieces of rock.
Okay, so there's this really neat invention called a Whipple shield, and what you have is on the outside of the metallic the cans, the pressure vessels, you have one layer that is a very thin sacrificial layer around the outside. And then you have the much heavier inner shell that is the pressure vessel, right? So people live on this side. There's vacuum mostly between this outer sacrificial layer and the metal. So what happens is, if you've seen bullets hit something, you've probably seen the videos of something like this. When it hits that first piece of material, it spreads out into a nice cone. And each individual element, so it's basically largely vaporized, but there's still obviously material there. And that material is going at the same energy that it was before, but now it's spread out across all of these tiny little pieces. And so with these tiny little pieces impact essentially a much larger surface area on the inside, they don't have enough energy to penetrate it. And that is the whole point of a Whipple shield. It's not the only type of micrometeoroid debris protection that we have, but that is the big one, and that is very, very effective.
Is that the same for when they're working out in the space suits? If they get hit by something on the spacesuit, or are they kind of like, I'm gonna have to go back inside and sort this out?
If they were to be hit with something, yes, you would have to go back inside and sort it out. So first of all, they present a much smaller target, right? Okay. Yeah. The spacesuits themselves are multiple layers. I'm not super familiar with the layup, but it's when you have multiple layers like that, you get an effect that's something like a Whipple shield, not as rigid and not as good, but it does have some extra protection along those lines. So I think number one, we've been relatively lucky that we've not had any real debris impacts that I'm aware of. And honestly, in the low Earth orbit, your problem is more from space junk, what we call orbital debris, than from micrometeoroids themselves. So the good news about that is the speed is generally lower because it's just orbital velocity, as opposed to something like Oumuamua, for instance, which came in at just crazy high speeds, way, way higher than you would have for just Earth orbit. So, typically we're just, 17,000 miles an hour is still very fast but that's your typical orbital velocity around the orbit of space station. So you're not going to see as much of a problem. And usually our debris, even we track debris, and actually the space station does debris avoidance maneuvers if there's anything large enough to be tracked that we know is on a collision course. So they will temporarily lower their altitude or raise their altitude depending on what's the best maneuver to make. And that has the effect of, when you lower your altitude, you actually speed up. And when you raise your altitude, you slow down. And so that's, that gives you that net effect of, say, hit the brakes a little bit so that the thing will pass you instead of hitting you.
Yeah.
That's the idea.
Okay.
So
hit the brakes, you'll fly right by.
Right. So anything that's big that we know about, and we track things down to, I can't remember the exact number. I want to say it's around down to 4 inches, I think, in diameter. So wow. We're tracking every little tiny piece of these, where we know a satellite has exploded, there's been a missile test or something like that, where we know these debris fields are. So we're typically aware of the debris in time to avoid it. Like, for instance, when the Russians shot down their own satellite, this was back, about 2 years ago, something like that. And we had to do a debris avoidance maneuver, even though there were Russian, cosmonauts on board the station, and they did it in an orbit that they knew could potentially intersect the ISS, which everybody was like, "What are you doing, you idiots?" When they did it, that was our general opinion at NASA anyway, or at least with the people around me, not NASA's opinion. Okay, so again, just my opinion, but it was they had to go to safe havens. Just in case. Safe haven means get in your crew return vehicle. So if you came up on a Soyuz, you get back in the Soyuz. If you came up on a Crew Dragon, you get back into Crew Dragon, just in case that, even though with the debris avoidance and everything else, you still hit something, you're in the safe haven and you can just, jet back to the Earth. So that's how they handle it. We take a lot of risks, and we've been exceptionally lucky not to have any more debris hits than we have. So now you can see some sections. There's one near the end of the Canadarm, the arm that does all the maneuvering and things. There's a chunk out of the one of the debris shields on the side of that that you can occasionally see in a shot. That was a micrometeoroid hit. Nothing we can do about it. It's just gone, right? So,
yeah, I mean, to slightly bring it on track with what we originally talked about with Project
Can
Bluebeam.
we not for a second?
Yeah, because
I've got one.
I do want to ask him a Trekkie question, though.
Yeah, I've got an ISS thing
Trekkie.
before we go any further. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. To preface, right before I say this, yeah, I'm not a flat earther, but I do think there's elements within that conspiracy that people have clicked onto, and like 2 and 2's come up with 17. Okay. So I know the ISS is up there. I've seen it up there. I know there's something up there, and there's something going on. What do you make of clearly fake footage from inside the ISS? Because there's been numerous videos that we can pull up and look at all day long, that I've shown to friends that work in media, in graphic design, and in television. And they're not conspiracy theorists, and they've said, look, that's a layer. That's a layer failing in that. The two that come to mind especially is the one where you have the 3 people on the ISS, and the layer of them pixelates and all goes into one before the feed goes, where the back layer of that stays as a static image. And the most interesting one for me is the one which shows a guy floating down the corridor and through a door, but he disappears a foot before the door as it goes through. And there's no there's no reasonable explanation for that apart from it was done in After Effects. And I don't know where to put myself with that stuff.
It's augmented reality, right?
I mean, it could be, but it shouldn't be.
I'm not familiar with the ones you're talking about specifically. I've seen hours and hours of footage, and I'll confident in that of actual people on the space station. So I'm pretty comfortable with my hours and hours of footage.
I'm sure there's people up there. Don't get me wrong. I'm sure there's people up there. But what I'm confused with is why some of the stuff isn't real.
I honestly don't have an answer for you, because there wouldn't be a good rationale for faking anything like that. So I agree with you there. If someone, is looking at it and seeing something that they believe is fake, then I can't fathom why, NASA or any other space agency would want to do that, because it only hurts their credibility if that was the case. So
hopefully next time if you're on here again and we know you're coming on, I'll make sure that we have that clip ready because the guy disappearing before the hatch it's pretty fucking wild.
I'm gonna have to look that one up because that does sound interesting. So
either that or none of us are real, and we're all just Elon Musk is right, and we're just a computer program. We're all glitching. The problem is these guys are that far up. They're on the edge of the kind of like the program. So sometimes it glitches out.
Gotcha.
I mean, you never know. I mean, it would be James, you would be pretty pissed off if you built that thing. You'd engineered that thing, and it was empty.
Oh yeah. I would definitely would be.
All that hard work, just where are they? No, I mean, I know what Lee's talking about though. It is very strange. I think Lee, me and you have we've both spoke about this.
Yeah.
I always talk about, I don't know why they need to make a big deal about the wavy hair that goes everywhere. I would think the sensible thing to do if you got really long hair, put it in a bun, because that's going to get caught in the electrics. I think that's a little bit.
That's what all the girls do, but they may do it for the lady astronauts. They may do that, like for a demo for the kids when, because they do a lot of astronauts get to play public ambassadors a lot. And so I know I've seen, I think Sunita Williams specifically undo her hair just for the purpose of showing what it would look like to the young ladies who might be watching, from her K through 12, whatever broadcast. So, that kind of thing.
They should do NASA should do a Vidal Sassoon advert. Do you guys get that in the States? The Vidal Sassoon?
Yeah.
It's worth it. Yeah. They should do it. Definitely.
That's funny.
Yeah. Rich, you was really. I could see you were eager to ask some more UFO questions for the NASA guy.
No, I can't remember at this moment what it was.
Because we was talking about the Tic Tac, and we've been talking a lot about the threat that is all over the news when it comes to. Well, your news, not UK news. We have no idea over here because nobody talks about UFOs in the UK. It seems to be all in the States. But
maybe we have more nutters over here.
Well, that's what my dad would say, and he may be watching this because he loves a bit of NASA. But yeah, I mean. It is weird, and we spoke about this many a times, that in the UK we get none of this, none of the UFO stuff. But it's all you guys over there. Do you ever see them in the sky yourself, James? Do you ever see these UFOs?
I have certainly seen things in the sky I couldn't identify, but that doesn't. Because we just use that term for anything that can't be identified. I won't say they couldn't be identified, just that I looked at them and didn't know right that moment what it was. I might have a supposition that it was a satellite passing over, for instance. But I don't think I've witnessed anything that couldn't be explained. I'll go with that. Not personally.
Is that one of the things that NASA tells you to say?
No, believe it or not, I don't think I've ever been told, don't say flat Earth, don't say we never went to the moon, and don't say UFO. That has not come up in a topic of conversation.
I mean, I've said many times when it comes to flat Earth. I know you guys don't have a guy that is in the business of NASA that's like Elon Musk, but I would think with Elon Musk's sense of humor, you see the guy on Twitter and what have you, that he's got this rocket that he's building. Why does he not get the biggest flat earther and just put him on board and fly him around the moon? That. And then when he comes back and he just goes, still flat, I've been in a simulation.
I think that's probably what would happen, and yeah, so
I was
almost no point, right? Unfortunately, was it the guy that decided he was going to fly his own rocket? It was a daredevil, Mike something.
Yeah, God bless him.
Yeah. Unfortunately, he I guess he knows now for sure, but. I think I'm sad that he didn't make it up because I think he would have had good insight.
Yeah, I don't think he ever got high enough, did he, to see the curvature?
No.
Yeah, it was hardly high enough.
and I don't know that he would have ever, but you know, that's still kind of tragic for him, you know, because Daredevil and all, you still don't see people, you know, knocking themselves off by accident.
Yeah.
But I've got a lot of respect for somebody like that.
Right.
You know, that thought, you know, I think it's flat, so I'm going to build a rocket and I'm going to find out myself.
Right.
I don't actually think he was a flat earther, you know. I think that I know that was the way that story was sort of angled, but I think he was just into doing amateur rocketry, and because of the whole flat earth thing that was around, there was a group of flat earthers funded that particular thing, and part of the funding was sticking the sticker on the side of it. So I don't actually think he was a flat earther, but
I think you're right about
that.
It
matters now.
True enough. True enough.
Rest in peace.
So going back to the Oumuamua thing, you did mention that it was a rock, and I'm inclined to agree. But there's been a back and forth between the. So obviously, it was R.V. Loeb that controversially stated that because of its change in velocity once it got past the sun, that said that it could be some kind of light sail, and because of its reflective nature, you know, which is fine. And then I think there was a load of guys that went away, and I think they worked for about 3 years. They came back with the idea that because of its reflectiveness, because of its shape, that it's most likely to be a big lump of frozen nitrogen, and that would be outgassing as it went near the sun, you know, and that would explain the change in velocity, etc. But Avi Loeb actually quite publicly shot that down. What he seemed to say was that nitrogen, because of their modeling of the galaxy, that nitrogen wouldn't exist in that kind of form, in those amounts. And I don't see anybody has come back to him with that. But he just said that it was definitely not a nitrogen berg, if you like. That's what he used. Have you heard anybody come back to him and say yes, it is?
I have not heard that someone refuted it, but I personally don't see why it couldn't be. You know, if nothing else, you know, if it was a piece of something else that was larger that had exploded, like we could have a nitrogen iceberg or something like on a planet that was primarily nitrogen, didn't have like we have here. If the temperature was cold enough, we could certainly freeze some nitrogen into some ice. You know, if something like that were to happen, and then there was a huge meteorite impact that knocks a big chunk off into space, that, you know, of course, would initially vaporize and then reform, perhaps. I don't see that there's any reason to preclude a chunk of material like that. And even if it wasn't, well, let's just say it's all solid nitrogen. You know, my previous assessment of there's no telling what it collected in the interim thousands of years while it's moving through the void, that, you know, couldn't have off-gassed off in a similar fashion. So, also highly reflective surfaces do make, good solar sails. And that if he's saying that it's responding to light pressure, then any highly reflective surface of the appropriate surface area would respond to the light pressure and consequently have a change in velocity just due to light pressure from the sun, even without volatiles off-gassing.
Yeah, it seemed to have happened to an old discarded NASA rocket, didn't it? There was something to do with that as well. So
I remember that.
Yep. Yeah,
it was a S4B upper stage, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So
when we talk about faster than light travel, and if extraterrestrials are coming here, and to get here they would have to either bend space and time or go way over, you know, warp 9 or whatever to get here.
Right.
where is NASA when it comes to that technology? And I don't know how much you may even know about this, but going at that sort of speed when it comes to hitting these tiny little bits of rock.
That is certainly one of the issues that would come up. Now, the things that I've seen,
And I ask that because of how the aliens are actually getting here, if they're getting here at all.
Right. How are they not hitting debris at some point? And one might assume that they do what you have in Star Trek is the navigational deflector, right? Which basically acts like a bow shock that just sort of pushes everything out of their way as they move. So that's how they handle it, in Star Trek. I don't see why you wouldn't have something along those lines doing something similar. Of course, projecting that out to some distance would be kind of hard to follow, but because anything you project out presumably wouldn't be going faster than the speed of light, and yet you are. So you're passing your own beam, and so there's a little flaw in that philosophy. And if you go in the next generation, they're more into the warp bubble effect, right? So they're not moving through space, but the bubble is, and the bubble is impervious to things like that because they're just going to move around it, right? They've got this little pocket of not space that's moving through space, and everything around it just warps out of the way, right? So, and they can move that pocket of space as fast as they want.
Could that mode of travel be dangerous to space itself, like creating all this disturbance just so we could travel? Kind of like waves on an ocean. I mean, does it interrupt something?
Like a butterfly effect, Rich.
Guess we'll have to find out when we do it.
I just always wondered if that was a possibility.
I know what you're saying, Rich. Theoretical physics out there about it, but I'm not aware of it. So,
yeah, I wonder if it creates some sort of ripple effect. Everybody's like on water is what I'm trying to imagine it like.
You're kind of talking about the butterfly effect, Rich, aren't you?
Of the actual space, yeah.
Well,
space
we have
itself.
the LIGO detectors, don't we? Which are detectors set up to pick up warps in space-time due to cataclysmic events a long way away. Supposedly these things happen all the time, and we don't really notice them. They have to be incredibly sensitive to pick it up.
Right.
So I get it. So if you wanted to push a ship using this, the amount of energy and force that you would need to build something that was as big as a ship to put it in and move it must be huge.
That's why they had to have antimatter to make it work.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, speaking of antimatter, there is a couple of fascinating drive technologies which might actually be reasonably achievable. The one I like the best is positron dynamics. They are using we use a radioisotope to do PET scans, which are also done with positrons. So they're planning to use basically a radioactive isotope that emits positrons, and using the positrons in a beam to destabilize destabilize fission material, and then the fission material will then explode and collapse a deuterium ball and create fusion. So you get these little micro fusion events, which are massively energetic, and all of it is caused by basically destabilizing it using a tiny little positron or two.
So how are we generating those positrons? Does it take a lot of energy to do?
Well, like I said, they're using the radioactive isotope that just decays. As it's decaying, it gets emitting positrons, and we do this today with PET scans. So it's not new tech. It's just you'd have to be able to concentrate it and direct it and do enough of it to make all this happen. So, and then of course you have to figure out how to deal with, little fusion bombs going off in your combustion chamber. So that's probably the harder engineering challenge than, focusing positrons. So, because since they have a positive charge, you can focus them with an electric field. There's bound to be a way to do it. It does require a lot of electricity on board to just to do the focusing and handling that. But if you can harvest any of the energy from the fusion reactions that are going on in the combustion chamber, then you have a practically unlimited source of energy there. Still limited by how much fusion fuel you have, and like I said, it has fissionable material outside of it. So then you have to have, these pellets that are basically frozen deuterium covered with uranium, maybe 238 or something, which would not normally be fissible. But when you destabilize it with a positron, you can still cause fission, So,
Okay.
It's kind of interesting.
I'd not heard of, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. Go for it.
No, you first.
Should we rock, paper, scissors for it?
I'll go.
No,
Go
Yeah,
for it.
blank start. Yeah. I thought you'd fall asleep.
No, man. I think I got COVID again. I don't feel well. But, I really wanted to stick around because James coming on, and we have a mutual friend, and I wanted to make sure he felt comfortable. But James, I have a bit of.
It's good, Black Star, because now the chat doesn't know you're full of shit.
No, I'm definitely full of shit. Always assume that at all times. Never think to tell them the truth. It just makes it easier for me to amaze you. But so James, I have a bit of Star Trek trivia because I know you're a fan, and you clearly said you're a fan. Kess used to live behind me from Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, not the young, hot Kess from the show. She was life had really worn her down, and I kind of wish she lived somewhere else for a while. And she used to fight the cops nude a lot. Wasn't a real high point in her life. Totally off topic. Just figure I'd throw that out. Rich, figure out who's going to go first. You guys have a good time.
I just saw a question in the chat room for Ian McFadden. James, who gave NASA the green light to bomb the moon? And should we nuke Mars?
Well, I'm not 100% sure where the actual decision came from, but I mean, what we did was relatively low power overall. You're just basically impacting upper stages, purposely impacting stages into the moon to release volatiles like water. Hopefully, we'd find water that way, and then you can. And that's actually how we verified that there is water in the south pole of the moon. I forget the Chandrayaan-1, which was the first Indian orbiter of the moon, was taking imagery of an impactor that we put out, and so that the impact hit the crater, the volatiles came up. They were able to analyze those gases with spectrography. Get my words right, spectrography. Anyway, tell that it did have water vapor in that mix. So at this point, it's like how much permission do you need, because nobody lives there, nobody has ownership. So you don't have to go to international treaty and or ask forgiveness from the UN for doing it. It's scientific purposes, and nobody was hurt in the process. So I assume it was eventually rubber stamped by the NASA administrator, whoever was the admin at that time, probably Dan Golden back then. But anyway, as far as why don't we nuke Mars, the amount of energy that you could release, even with our biggest nuclear weapons, wouldn't wouldn't have any persistent effect, I believe, on Mars. Mars has 1% of the atmosphere of the Earth, and it's virtually all carbon dioxide. So it's 1% of what we have on Earth. So if you're trying to, nuke Mars with the idea that you can, thicken up the atmosphere and have this, runaway greenhouse effect or whatever that warms the planet, I'm not convinced that can work, especially not with just, a dozen, maybe let's say we take a dozen of our biggest thermonuclear weapons, which, in the megatons, and somehow get them to Mars, which of course is pretty problematic. You would release more energy, honestly, by tweaking an asteroid to slam into Mars, and that kind of thing actually happens fairly often, on the grand scheme of things, and yet Mars still only has 1% of Earth's atmosphere. So I think the issue there is there's just not the magnetic field isn't strong enough to deflect the solar wind, and the solar wind erodes away the gases that do off gas over time. And so I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we have more than that without setting up some kind of deflector between the sun and Mars for that purpose. And I have seen some work on that, setting up in the L2 position between the sun and Mars. And it's a relatively stable gravitation point, and having a large electromagnetic shield to basically help diffuse the solar wind and maybe allow Mars to repopulate its atmosphere over time. So
what do you make of Elon's vision for Mars? Because he's the guy that seems to be the one that is pulling out all the stops when it comes to getting us to Mars on is it Starship? Is that what he's called? Is that what it's called?
Starship, yeah. So I'm 100% behind this. I mean, I think Starship's a great rocket. Like I said, they've handled some of the things that we typically design spacecraft in aluminum, and he says, well, why are we doing aluminum? Why don't we just do stainless steel? Because it's got all of these better properties, and so and they're making trade-offs, like they can't get nearly as much payload to orbit because they have to keep so much fuel behind in order to land. But they make that same trade-off with Falcon 9 for launches. So Starship's got all sorts of things going for it. It does have to be refueled in orbit in order to do these Mars missions, and it's still going to be lengthy, and it's still going to be dangerous, but there will be people who will want to do it. And I do believe it can be done, and that maybe SpaceX, along with, I can't believe that if SpaceX can demonstrate they can do it, that NASA and ESA and JAXA and maybe even the Chinese Space Agency and the Indian Space Agency won't want to jump on this and get in. So it's never going to be, Elon taking a bunch of billionaires to Mars. First of all, most billionaires probably don't want to go. They have a comfortable life here. Why risk it all to go to Mars? Maybe a few, but I think that once it's been demonstrated that it can be done, everybody, all country wise, and probably a lot of private organizations that have the cash will be, wanting to jump in here and get involved. And at that point, it becomes an inevitability.
To put the record straight for you're an engineer.
Uh-huh.
Yep. And you know about space.
So space is my hobby as well as my job. I studied space long before I became an engineer. So yeah.
And we're talking about Elon Musk.
Mm-hmm.
And and he put something in space that a lot of people are saying that thing could not go in space without its tires exploding. And so what when you saw the car launch into space, and you must have seen the meme. It looks, it's real because it looks fake or whatever he said. I can't remember what he said.
Yeah.
But the car in space, is that well, obviously it's possible, but
well, I mean, it's not going to be a functional vehicle afterwards, and I'm sure they had to strip it down and take the batteries out of it, and because the batteries, of course, weigh a lot, and they're prone to have little micro explosions or whatever because they're sort of pressurized with the liquid that's inside.
I believe he made a big point about saying no, it's one of my.
So he really didn't do anything else. That's it. Okay.
Liam, am I right by that? Did he say?
Yeah. So the two things that got me was I would have thought if you stuck a wheel into space, something would have happened vacuum wise, and the extreme temperatures with paint, I'd have thought should have gone.
Oh, I'm sure the paint
well
is on by now, but so there's not that much as far as extreme temperature going up. Over time, you get exposure because of radiation with the sun, but you do a roll to try to ameliorate. We even do that with some of our current vehicles. You roll to try to never have the same side facing the sun constantly, because in that way you ameliorate the temperature gradient over time. But as far as the tires go, there's only 14 psi difference between being on the ground and being in space, right? So at Earth sea level is 14.7 psi, 1 atmosphere, whatever. I'm no good with metric units, unfortunately. I'm sure there's a number of pascals that is, but anyway, so there's not, space doesn't suck as much as atmosphere blows, right? So if you put 30 psi in a tire on the ground, and then you take it to space, it's effectively got 45 psi, 47 psi now across the rubber, pressing out on the rubber. So
you could have that in a tire without anything going.
A tire to probably 45, 47, maybe even 50 psi on the ground.
In a vacuum, really?
Yeah, because a vacuum, like I said, is just the lack of atmosphere, right? Down here we have 14.7 psi. So in orbit, you have effectively 0. So the delta P across the change in pressure across the rubber of the tire now goes from 30 on the ground to 47 or 44, 14.7. So 44, just about 45, let's say, PSI in space. So 45 PSI for a tire is really nothing. I mean, if they started at 45 and maybe you go to 60 when you get into space, maybe you could run into an issue there. But if they started at typical average inflation of, they say, 30 PSI, then I don't see why it would be a problem. So
what would that car look like now?
I'm nearly 100% sure that all the paint would be gone, because it would have acceded to the atomic oxygen and getting pelted by tiny particles of dust and other things, and just being baked by the sunlight. So beyond that, it's hard to know. The plastics, if I think it's in a solar orbit, if I remember correctly, that's not quite out to Mars. So out there's probably not as much free atomic oxygen as there is in low Earth orbit. But even if it was in low Earth orbit, it would definitely have eroded away all the plastics. Out in the space between Earth and Mars, there's probably a lot less things to come in contact with. So it may have survived okay.
Just like the flag on the moon, right? It would have oxidized, all white now?
Possibly. Now, the moon, again, doesn't have any real oxygen or anything else there. So It depends on. I'm not 100% sure what they made it out of. I thought it was just cloth with a wire inside to make it look like it was wavy. And if that's the case, yeah, probably bleached by the UV more than by
Right.
oxygen. So yeah, it's probably been bleached to white.
And some of the plastics as well. They would be discolored, particularly ABS or anything like that.
Right. Anything that's got a UV sensitivity.
Probably the most expensive car ever now, though. You know, that
Yes.
car would be worth an absolute fortune.
Having been the only car to space, yes, I imagine it would. Yeah,
I can just see it like in 300 years, like space jockeys going out and they're looking for the Tesla car. You know, space pirates. I've got the Tesla.
Yeah,
got the crown jewels. So why are we not on the moon now?
lack of political will. You know, unfortunately, I've been personal witness to the inefficiency of government. So NASA is wholly at the whim of Congress, and Congress is not interested in exploring space. Congress is interested in putting money into their districts to get reelected, and whatever other motivations they may have. There may be some elements who are actually genuinely interested, you know, some individual senators, or representatives and so forth that are genuinely interested in exploration. But I think the majority of them are just doing their job to make sure they've got as much money coming from government spending into their districts as they can. I certainly feel like this is true of the senators in Alabama, who I've personally been a beneficiary of, since that's how I get paid. But on the flip side of that, they don't do any favors for real exploration. For instance, when the commercial crew activity first began, which we've now seen be very successful, at least on the SpaceX side, and not quite as successful on the Boeing side. But anyway, when that first started, the senator from my part of Alabama, Shelby, literally wrote the appropriations bill in such a way that it was nearly impossible to fund it, because he did not want the commercial industry to take over spaceflight. So even though it's very beneficial to all of us, and they've demonstrated they can do it a lot faster than we did at NASA. It was very much trying to slow things down so that the money would continue to pour into their districts. And you know, for the space shuttle, what we did for 20 plus years with the space shuttle program, the space shuttle did a lot of great science. It put the space station in orbit. It put the Hubble Space Telescope in orbit. But what it did much more so than that is it fed 40,000 people money for their jobs. And that was literally the goal, to keep 40,000 people employed day in and day out, year after year, in order to keep money in various districts, keep jobs in the Space Coast, keep jobs in Huntsville, keep jobs in Johnson Space Center, and to a lesser extent the other NASA centers. So
similar things happening with the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, isn't it? That's a very big employer.
Yeah. See how expensive we can make the project.
Who was the guy? And you guys might have to help me out here. I can't remember the name of the NASA guy that said, and he said there's a video of him saying it, that they lost the technology to go to the moon.
I don't
How-
remember
how-
the person,
how
but I've
does-
heard the quote.
yeah, I mean, it's there.
So
Try
There-
and find it, because you must have seen the clip. And the guy that says we've lost the technology that goes to the moon, and he's a NASA guy. I don't
He
get.
was an astronaut, wasn't he? He was an astronaut. He said, I would go back to the moon in a nanosecond.
Yes, that's it. But we've lost the
We've
technology.
lost the technology, and it would be a painful process to try and rebuild it. That was a direct quote.
okay, that I will agree with. We if say Buzz Aldrin, for instance, I don't know if that's him, said he wanted to go
wasn't
back to
Buzz.
the moon. Okay. Then, but whoever, we don't have a Saturn V, and it would be difficult to just, we have the drawings and, but there's so much more that goes into building something like a Saturn V than just the engineering design drawings, because you also get the experience of having built it once, and you iron out the kinks and you figure out how to do this a little better, that a little better, and trim some mass off here, fix a problem over there. And those things do get documented sometimes, but a lot of it just comes down to technique and the artisanship of the builders, the machinists, the welders, the people who actually rivet one part to another. There's an art to that. I don't personally go build things because I know how to do some of those things. I can look at it and understand how to do it, but I don't have the years of the skill, the artisanship behind just doing it, right? And so the craftsmen, I'll call them, that do that work are just outstanding. And especially back in the days of the Apollo time, we didn't have a lot of computer generated anything. So everything was hand done. Nothing, very, very little of it was done automatically by machine and so forth. So to redo it, you need to hire those same guys, and they need to try to remember what they did 50 years ago. Well, most of them are dead. So obviously that's never going to happen. And so from that standpoint, yeah, we lost the technology. We lost the knowledge base of the people who did it. We have the documents, we've got complete design drawings for the Saturn V. Could we rebuild one? Yeah, I mean, we could. Would you want to? Probably not. Because there's probably more efficient ways to do it. And, hopefully we'll be finding some of those soon. SLS is going to send a much larger capsule to the moon than the Saturn V did, for instance. So, and hopefully we'll launch sometime this summer. And then of course, if SpaceX can land a Starship on the moon, that's orders of magnitude larger than the Apollo mission. So that is, just a huge advantage in the amount of mass you can drop onto the moon. I mean, you're talking about being able to survive for a few hours like the Apollo astronauts did versus being able to survive for a couple of weeks, which is what we're shooting for now. So big difference in technology.
Do you think though that the technology that Musk has pioneered, with the vertical landing of booster rockets and things like that, the semi-automation of that would make it far safer to land on the moon than it did with Armstrong and Aldrin, etc.?
I think so. I mean, number one, we've got better maps of the moon than we've got years of gravity field mapping. Some of the problem was the fact that the gravity fields fluctuate as you go around, just due to the shift in mass. It's not all nicely uniform, so there's some issues there. But yeah, I think with an automated setup, that it's definitely going to be better. And we're going to land one on the moon unoccupied before we land it occupied. So again, we'll have another advantage there for having done it. And in addition to that, There's going to be a lot of commercial lunar payloads. Those should be coming up toward the end of this year and in subsequent years that will be also autonomous. They'll be much smaller, but there should be a flurry of landers over the next 5 years that will be landing on the moon, and that will, obviously benefit everybody because, again, we'll get some experience from those on how they landed, what gravity, fluctuations they were seeing, how much debris they kick up as they land. All of that stuff is important. We have an issue with, the Starship can't land with its main engines because it would be, kicking up huge amounts of debris as it was landing. So the lunar Starship is going to have it's kind of side mounted engines to do that work, just to keep the debris from being so bad.
When it comes to I always struggle with this, and this is probably a bit of a conspiracy thing, but I imagine there to be a base there. I always think, have they got a secret base there? Because that would make the most sense for them to do a secret space mission. To get to beat the competition, to have that. You guys have already been there. You've been, what is it? How many times now? Is it
6?
6 times. 6 times. Yeah.
Landed Apollo 6 times.
Yeah, 6 times on the moon. But not once for, let's get that base built. I would if I was a betting man, there's probably the majority of NASA wouldn't even know about it, because if it was top secret, a base on the moon would make
the majority
sense.
of NASA would certainly not know about it. The problem is the Saturn V. We were right at the limit of what it could do to put the people on the moon in Apollo 11, right? So if you look at the Saturn V launch vehicle as it progressed from like Apollo, was Apollo 5? It was the first Saturn V launch. I can't remember. Anyway, Apollo 4 maybe. All the way up through the Skylab launch, which was still using the same launch vehicle, which would have been Apollo 18. The vehicle actually changes on the outside. There's these small solid rockets on the outside called the ullage motors in the second stage, and they actually force the fuel backward by giving it a little bit of forward thrust, right? So that when the engines start on the second stage, they have liquid rather than gas, because you don't have gravity to work with, so you could ingest gas as easily as liquid if you don't have something settling that propellant to the back. So anyway, they figured out somewhere along the way that they didn't need them, and they were able to get rid of them. But when they first started, they had 8 of them. By the time they launched Apollo 11, they were down to 4 because they needed the weight. So by getting rid of these things, that's more payload you can carry, right? And by the time they did Apollo 17, where they, actually I think it was 15, where they had the lunar rover, they were doing everything they could to get the mass of the launch vehicle down to the point where they could send that rover along with the lander and the command module and service module. And just like, they were paying technicians like $100 a pound. If you can figure out how to get rid of a pound, we'll give you $100, that kind of thing. Just every little bit you could take out of the vehicle to get that mass down. So that was one of the things that's visible on the outside. They got rid of those ullage motors because A, with flight experience, they realized they didn't actually need them, and B, with they needed that mass gone so that they could squeeze every last pound out to be able to get the lunar rover on there. So if they had that much trouble just to get the tiny little bit of mass they needed to get that lunar rover, which was, made of, this mesh. The tires were mesh just to keep the weight down and, all that stuff. Just this tiny little rover. How are you going to get enough material for a base? And you don't just have to have like the structure. You have to constantly resupply them with water and air and food. we didn't have a way to recycle air to the level that we do now. They got rid of the CO2 by having, they call them, I think it's a hydroxide. I can't remember exactly the chemical, but it's a chemical that gets used up in the process of absorbing carbon dioxide. So you got a limited amount of it to scrub the CO2 out of the air. Otherwise, the astronauts poison themselves with their own, exhale over time. So that is something that we had a very limited quantity of, and that's why they had, the time frame they had a few days worth, and that's it. You start talking about a base, you're thinking, what do I need? Weeks worth? How do I generate power? We didn't have good solar panels in the 60s. I mean, they existed, but they were terrible and they were heavy. When you do have solar panels, now you got to get rid of your heat some way, because solar panels tend to get hot more than they generate electricity. So you got to dissipate that heat somehow. So there's all sorts of things that go into that equation of how do I live on the moon? We can't grow plants we can grow plants on lunar soil with a lot of help, but hydroponics wasn't really a thing at that point. Now they've got aeroponics, which would be, just basically mists the roots of the plant, and you can grow things in on the space station with that. And we do grow plants on the space station all the time. But back then we didn't have that tech. It just wasn't there. It's a nice to think we could have, but it was a struggle to be able to keep the astronauts alive for as long as we did on the few hours they were on the moon. So,
James, just going off on a completely different tangent, something just
Sure.
occurred to me, if you don't mind. James Webb Telescope, how much do you know about the projects that they're doing with it?
Most of that's what I've seen on the internet. I don't have any direct involvement with it. So.
Right. Okay. I was only going to ask because I've been in touch with a few people, and they tell me that there's no plans for them to look at Tabby's star. I don't know whether you remember about Tabby's star, or do you know about it? This is the star that has been dipping in brightness quite markedly over the past few years, on and off, and intermittently as well. So we don't know what that is, and some people have speculated that it might be a Dyson sphere. Other people have speculated there might be swarms of comets or dust. Other people have said it could be mining activity. Just why?
Why not that star?
Why aren't they looking at Tabby's star?
Well, the way I understand how these things work, there's basically a consortium that's not really run by NASA, or in this case, NASA and ESA are joint on this, but it's not run by them. It's run by a consortium of universities that then will dole out time, just like you would at a regular observatory. There's a certain amount of time available for people to do observations. So what would have to happen would be an organization that was interested enough makes a proposal for the use of the time, and it would get approved or not, and go from there. But it's certainly not something that NASA could control. Like NASA would say, "Oh, we don't want them looking at Tabby's star," because they don't actually exert that kind of control. So it would be something where the interested party would have to convince the whatever review board that reviews the potential science experiments that it has enough merit to warrant the time spent on doing it. That's basically what it would come down to.
Yeah, I think that was the case. I just wondered whether you'd heard anything. That's all.
No, I haven't heard anything directly.
Cool, thank you.
You've heard of the James Webb Telescope? Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry.
Rich, you go, mate.
Go ahead.
No, let's seriously. Yours is more important.
Well, I was, just curious. are they with? I'm just curious. Will they be able to see further than the 13.8 billion years that we think is as old as the universe is? Are we going to see further and see it's 30 billion years old with that telescope?
I highly doubt we're going to find out that it's older. But the good news
aren't
is,
we limited with Hubble? Why can't we see further than what we're seeing? Because they think, I don't know where the center of the universe is, because there isn't one from what I heard. But
yeah,
I mean, is there a starting point? And I just think it's going to be bigger than what we found already. If you could explain why it isn't, I'd really love an answer.
I guess they may find out that it is bigger, because as you said, one of our limitations is the fact that Hubble works on visible light. So, and we've got plenty of satellites that look in the X-ray, but we haven't had a very powerful satellite telescope to look in the infrared. And the infrared, of course, is light as it's traveling, as it's it shifts to the red, and so virtually everything we would see would be infrared. Plus, it will also be including heat signatures and things like that. So there's a lot of things that would be invisible in visible light, but could be potentially detected in infrared. So that's the focus, and that's why they went for an infrared satellite, which is also why they have to have a heat shield from even as far out as they are to keep the sun heating, because they have to stay ultra cold to be able to do the observations they're doing in the
They're never going to be able
infrared.
They won't be able to repair that thing. So what's the lifetime of it?
I forget what I've heard. I wouldn't expect it to be much more than 20 years, if that long. Okay. So things sometimes get a second life, and it depends. I think in this case, the limiting factors are the fuel to. So they use a thing called in satellites. They use a thing called reaction wheels to do most of the pointing and maneuvering. They don't use the thrusters very often, and so. But reaction wheels are basically gyroscopes, so you just spin them faster and faster and faster to get the reactions you need. But at some point, they're spinning as fast as they can spin, and so they do what they call a desaturation burn. So they're basically slowing it back down to practically nothing, and they counteract the reaction motion with the thrusters, and that allows them to desaturate the reaction wheels. So there's a limited amount of fuel to do that, and so at some point we'll run out of that fuel.
Oh, okay.
So that's one limiting factor. Another one is life of materials. As we've already had one micrometeoroid hit on a mirror, so at some point there will be enough of those that you won't be able to focus anything. So. Okay, so someone here says 10 years max, it looks like, on their comment. And I would believe that.
Yep.
We
thought the rovers were only going to last several months, right? They lasted, 15 years or something?
Curiosity, wow. That was
exactly.
Wasn't it long like that?
Yeah, I mean, Curiosity was... I thought Curiosity was only supposed to last...
Their primary missions were a few months, and
a few months.
Yeah, it's like 6 months, I think, or something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in those cases, they, part of that was just not having funding beyond that secured, and so there was a level of that. But some of it is also, like they had a dust storm come up and clear off the solar panels, and they suddenly started working better. So that was kismet, Nobody knew that was going to be happening.
Who engineered the helicopter?
A very small team at JPL, from what I understand.
Why did they not put a front-facing camera?
There could have been engineering challenges and reasons for it. I don't know. I can't imagine not doing it, but
why can you not imagine not doing that?
They don't want us to see anything straight out in case a building pops up.
Right.
Right? Isn't that what it is?
I would have probably figured out some way to put it on there if I'd been involved in a design, but I wasn't. So
Makes no sense.
So if you'd have designed the helicopter, you would have put a front-facing camera on that.
you know, I can't say that there weren't engineering challenges that made it impossible to do, but I do like to solve problems, so I think I would have figured out a way to make that happen. So,
Well, I mean, we've got. Am I right? Is the gimbal? That's how it works. That's the. No.
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of gimbaling, but they have one that looks mostly down. But you know, to gimbal, you have to have a mechanism to do that, and you have to have a power source to do that, and that's one less, you know, that's less power that you get to use for the propellers themselves, and it already takes some amount of time to charge the batteries back up to be able to lift off. So,
how much?
it just
power
could have been a
does it
trade.
go?
It's not that much, but every little bit. Hey, Ollie, I hate to say this, but I have to go, man.
I know you do.
This was fun.
You got a show soon. You got a show.
15 minutes, yeah. So I want to thank everybody. Yep. And James, it was fantastic meeting you. Nice talking with you. Great
Nice
stuff.
to meet you too.
Hey
Yeah,
James, you'll have to go on
fun stuff.
GUFON. You'll have to go on GUFON and talk some
Okay.
aerial threats.
Oh yeah, we'll have to talk more Mars.
Okay, I'll go check out his channel. That sounds cool.
Thanks, man. Black Star, Rich, Lee, it was fun.
Richie.
Ollie, thank you very much, everybody in
See
the
you,
audience. Giddy up. See you guys later.
Sorry,
Bye.
mate.
See you later, Rich.
See you, Richie.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everybody.
When it comes to Mars, I mean, there's so much interest there.
Yeah.
They keep sending these rovers over and over again. They send them to you see the kind of the path that the new rovers. What's the new one called? Perseverance. Yeah.
Mhm.
And you kind of see where it's wanting to go, and it's going into the to look for the water and what have you.
Mhm.
Some of the imagery that comes back, I completely understand when it comes to the image artifacts that you get all over that stuff because of the distance that it's traveling down, and then what we get when it's been putting out in mass. But
Right.
sometimes we see all these black squares over things and missing kind of it looks weird, like certain things have been almost covered up, I'm going to say. Do you believe that Mars may have possibly had, do you think NASA may know something that you guys don't about Mars? Or do you think that's just us nutters here?
Well, okay, so I think there are things we don't know about Mars. Do I think NASA's intentionally covering up any of those things? No, I don't really. I think, you know, you do have artifacts. You do have
You
errors of
definitely would say
transmission.
that.
What's that?
You would say that though, because you have to say that. Kind of.
That does limit my credibility. I'll agree.
Never a straight answer.
But yeah, no, I would. I don't really think that there's. I can't logic out a reason why that wouldn't be publicly released if it was available. To the point, most of the data that's out there is literally just put in raw, unprocessed format. So nobody has actually gone through this before it's put on the servers for citizen scientists to go and process themselves. I mean, we do this with Juno and a bunch of the other probes as well. They're literally putting out the raw feed, the information that we have, and it's up to amateur astronomers and so forth. I mean, obviously, NASA has people who do that too, but and the universities that are involved in the studies, will have people to do that. But as far as I know, all the raw data is just out there for anybody to check out if they want, and most of it, my understanding is, it's ported well before anybody's taken time to pour through it and find, something they might think was ooh, we can't let this out. I mean, if they were censoring anything, they would not have seen it by that point, and they would probably not be releasing the raw data as quickly as they seem to be. So I'll make that argument against the possibility that it's being censored.
At least you say there's a possibility that it is being censored.
Well, I'm saying I'm making an argument against that. So
there's a bit of a popular internet meme that goes around about especially about the ISS. You know, where you'll have people say there's an object that appeared on the camera, and then all of a sudden NASA cut the feed. You know what I mean? That seems to happen a lot.
It did do until they didn't, because didn't they take the live feed down, Rich? And they no longer did the live feeds because it was constantly live at one point.
Yeah.
So, it used to be you'd log into NASA TV and it was just space station views, 24/7, except when they had a news conference or something on. But there's plenty of reasons why they would have cut a feed at one point or another, but I can't speak to specifics. I know there's things that look like they're something that tend to be, shadows and, lights and ice crystals and things like we've already talked about, so.
Yeah. But what crosses my mind is, was there a time when NASA thought, oh, hang on, we've got a load of ice crystals here. This is going to send the conspiracy nuts off. Let's just cut the feed. It's going to be a bit easier, or do you know what I mean? And then they wouldn't have to waste their time trying to explain a lot of this to people,
Nothing gets explained though, does it? So, yeah.
Anyway, that was an interesting one. That's all, and it seemed to have happened quite a lot in the past, as I say, when there were lots of live feeds going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now it's just Elon Musk with his rocket with a mouse that just.
Yeah.
James, did you see the mouse? You have to admit that it did look like a mouse.
Yeah, it definitely looked like a mouse. I agree.
Poor little mouse.
What do you think that would be?
What's that?
What do you think it would be?
I don't know. I'd have to speculate. I don't even know how I would speculate. But
mouse confirmed.
Perhaps.
I mean, who knows? The rats can survive. They're like cockroaches. They can do it.
We have sent plenty of mice and stuff to space, but generally they're inside and in enclosures
and not walking along the side of a rocket booster.
Maybe that's it. Maybe all these years that you've been sending animals up into space inside capsules, and nobody thought to open the door. If we'd have just sent one out the window, like, well, fuck me, he's fine.
I somehow don't think they're going to be able to breathe vacuum very well.
Probably not. More than likely not. Maybe a cockroach.
Maybe
they say they could survive anything.
I think a cockroach would just stop breathing and then it would just start again when it got back. I mean,
yeah.
There are I believe, if I remember this correctly, there were some. They retrieved some instruments from the Surveyor satellite. No, it's a Surveyor. I can't remember. One of the landers that predated the Apollo missions, and one of the Apollo missions brought back equipment from that satellite, from that lander, and it had microorganisms that had been launched from Earth and had survived being on the moon in hard vacuum and UV and everything else for some amount of time, and then brought back to Earth and had survived all of that. So that's fairly impressive. It does lead some credence to panspermia. So
yeah, fascinating.
I mean, I suppose when it comes to a lot of the people that would watch a show like this, that they would be. And thank you, Bob, for the £5. By the way, I appreciate it, Skinny Bob. They would be in disbelief when it comes to a guy that's coming on a show that does work for NASA, that has NASA's back, but you're an engineer.
Mm.
So when you're doing the work for them, you understand how that works, how that space station works. Maybe not so much the rockets, or do you have? Yeah, you definitely didn't have knowledge on the rockets,
Right. I'm working on SLS right now, so.
right? Okay, but the people out there, and I've always wondered this, and this is, how come NASA don't do more? They don't show us more when it comes to space. Like, for example, we don't have many good pictures of our Earth from out of space. They show us pictures of Earth, but they are not great. And all the conspiracy theorists, they look at it and they go, "That's CGI," or "That is just." And you must have seen the documentary. A funny thing happened when we went to the moon, where they covered up the window and what have you.
Yeah, I think they covered up the window because the for sunlight and a I can't remember if there was a solar storm. There might
No,
have
but
been.
they were saying that they made a what was it, Lee?
It was to fake the Terminator line, wasn't it? That was the idea. They covered half of the porthole.
Oh, I see what you're
to
saying.
fake the Terminator line. So it's the idea being that they were still in low Earth orbit, and
Rather
they were
than
doing that
right out.
to fake a like looking at the Earth from further away.
I think
Okay.
what I'm saying, after all this time, it's been how many years is it been since we've actually been into space? I can't even answer that. I don't know.
Well, I mean, you mean been beyond low Earth orbit?
Yes.
Okay. The last 1972, so 50 years this year since the last people returned from lunar orbit. So
Why do we not have a really good picture of Earth?
Well, cameras weren't as good back then, number one. They were going through fairly small window. Good picture of Earth wasn't really one of the I guess one of the mission goals. We do have some decent pictures of Earth from other satellites. Like there's one, I want to say is it Soho? It's one of the solar orbiting satellites that from its position, it always sees the Earth in a fully lit, because it's basically between the sun and the Earth. And there's actually a really good shot of the far side of the moon because, the moon basically eclipses the Earth from their vantage point. And so it's a really nice shot of the moon, moving across the, it's not time lapse with, motion or anything, but there's a good shot of it, on the disk of the Earth. So I think
thought
we
that was
do
a time
have.
lapse. I thought that was a time lapse because isn't there a time lapse of it crossing the Earth?
There may be what I've seen has been stills, but that doesn't mean there's not something like that out there. But yeah, it's that's a pretty impressive feat there, and there should be plenty of good imagery of the Earth from Soho. I think it's Soho that I'm talking about here. So I don't know. I don't know where people get the idea that we don't have good imagery of them now taken by a person. Then yeah, no, maybe not, because you're just limited to what we had from Apollo. But we do have spacecraft that are farther out, obviously, since we've gone to other planets and so forth. So we should have some pretty solid imagery.
Go, Rich. What are you gonna say?
Well, I was just going to say that I definitely think we went to the moon, and I know.
Oh no,
why.
I didn't go that far. I just said I wanted some better
Well,
pictures of Earth.
No. Oh,
Maybe
I'm just going off on a
maybe
tangent. Let me explain.
But he does think the moon's flat.
yeah,
No,
triangle.
It's shaped like a quarter.
The reason why you have to have gone to the moon, and that is because I was born on the day they landed on the moon the first time,
Great.
in 1969, and
Looks
it's
so
my
good
only,
for that age, mate.
it's my only claim to fame.
Yes, see,
So
I'm
if I didn't
I'm
have
younger
that-
than you, so by about a year or so.
Yeah, so it was a big thing, and my parents filled my room full of space stuff, and I appeared in the paper under the line "Children born in the space age." So
Nice.
NASA's had a big part in formation of my personality in my life.
And I can never say we went to the moon because my dad will write me out of the will. So that's not. I'm not going to say that ever. But there was an interesting thing that the computer company, was it Nvidia? And I don't know why they had to do this, but they wanted to prove that NASA went to the moon with their computer technology, which I found
it was
fucking
lighting,
bizarre.
wasn't it? It was lighting. They
Yeah.
wanted to prove you could have the cross shadows. I found that really weird because I'd have to watch it again now because I watched that ages ago.
It was great.
But I remember watching it thinking, well, that's you're essentially building the moon in a like in a game engine, and so whatever you kind of want that to be, it's gonna be.
Right.
That's yeah. So I found that weird. To me, it just felt like an Nvidia tech demo.
I'm sure it was.
Yeah.
But I mean, we use simulations all the time that attempt to model real physics, as much as possible. So I mean, that's kind of the key of engineering these days is to model things up as realistically as possible, and then you go and validate your model by making real measurements, doing the real thing to prove that your model is accurate. So that's a big part of science and engineering these days. But we didn't have that kind of tech in the 60s, in 69. But yeah, I can see where NVIDIA was probably just showing off
What they can do.
Yeah,
Right.
lighting models and such.
Right.
Yeah. Black Star,
Yeah.
you still burning out Almo, or are you quite are you ready to add something before we end?
As we get to the end, I have a message that I am to ask James to do something very specific, and it involves his. James, you may not know this, or you guys probably don't know this about James. I don't know if he mentioned it because I've had a sick kid and I don't feel well. And James speaks another language. And
Oh, it's not
and our
Klingon.
friend. That's it.
I was going
That's
to
it.
joke and say it was Klingon. I was going to joke.
Has to be
He's
Klingon.
been sending me messages. He's like, "You have to have him do it." I was like, "I'm gonna wait till the end, man. Give the guy a break."
We'll do a separate interview, all in Klingon.
No, I'm not that fluent. I know a few phrases. That's about it. I can say kadeba, which is calling you an animal, as a curse. I can say nuchnech, which is a typical greeting. It means, what do you want? Let's see. There's a few, but things that come to mind are mostly from Star Trek 3 because I had that movie practically memorized. But I did study conversational Klingon, which was hosted by Michael Dorn. It was actually pretty cool. So
That's awesome. Well, see, I had to ask because I think I'm going to see our friend hopefully Friday, and I don't want him trying to slap me around. So
yeah, oh, that's all right. He calls me a rat every time he sees me, so you can call him a patah.
if I knew how to spell that, I'd text it to him right now.
So can you have a conversation in full Klingon?
Oh no. Like I said, I'm not that fluent. Like I said, I know some phrases. That's about it. I haven't practiced enough to be able to carry on a reasonable conversation. So you realize you're destroying my credibility now because I know Klingon, right?
I waited to the very end, man. I waited to the very end. I swear.
I'm teasing.
Yeah.
No, I admit fully to being a Trekkie. So,
as a Trekkie, do you know the original plot, what it was supposed to be on Star Trek? Is it Star Trek the motion picture, the first one, which was Vega, Voyager,
right?
No, Vija, yeah.
Right.
Do you know what the original plot was meant to be? But they got rid of it.
Well, I know it was supposed to be a pilot for a series originally, and they had the Spock character. I mean, because Leonard Nimoy didn't want to do the series, so they had Zahn was going to be the Spock character, and I've seen a few test shots from him, and then of course Ilea was going to be just a regular, cast member. Decker was going to be second in command, not the captain who'd been demoted. And Matt Decker is supposed to be the son of Will Decker. I'm sorry, Will Decker is supposed to be the son of Matt Decker, who was in the commander of the Constellation when the Constellation got eaten by the Doomsday Machine in the original series. So he's actually supposed to be his son. And that, of course, morphed into Riker and Troy from Next Generation. So they sort of eventually made that series just with different characters. But as far as TNG's original plot, or sorry,
the Voyager one originally was, and it was kind of going to be part of this show, but I'm definitely gonna have to change this thumbnail and probably change the title of the show. But to put Bluebeam when it comes to Star Trek, the first show, and you can look this up because I've been looking at it today. The first movie with the Voyager,
right?
Which was Vega. Was it Vija? Vija. Yeah, was supposed to be an alien species. A projection that was put on a planet. I don't know if it was Earth, but they were showing this to a primitive race, and that's Project Bluebeam, and it was weird that got canned, and they changed the whole thing to Voyager, which I do like that whole Voyager thing, but that computer could have never. There's no Skynet. It could never have learned like that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, the Voyager #1 in 300 years probably wouldn't have made it to another civilization. We've got Voyager 1 and 2 out right now, and Voyager 1 I think is a little further ahead, and it's not even to the Oort cloud. I mean, it's past the heliopause, but it's not even to the Oort cloud. So, and that's in the 50 years it's been in space, or 40 years it's been in space. So, has it been 45, something like that? So we launched in the early 70s. But anyway, I can't imagine in 300 years it would have ever, gotten anywhere near another civilization, because it's just not going that fast. And we are a long way from everywhere here. Planets are more dense, or stars are more dense nearer to the galactic center. But out here, where we are on the Sagittarius arm, 2/3 of the way out from the center, it's 4.5 years at light speed to reach the nearest star. So Yeah,
so
I agree with you. It's a bit implausible.
Yeah, you guys put a message on there, and showed where Earth was, showed what we are, what
Sure.
show our DNA.
Did the same thing with the Pioneer plaque too.
Yeah,
No DNA on that one, but yeah. No, I think the DNA was on the was in the Arecibo code.
Oh, right, okay.
Right.
Do you think that's a good idea?
Well, that's an interesting question. So far, we haven't encountered any hostile races, or we'd know about it, I guess.
I know, but so you guys keep for our country's enemies, and I'm not going to go anywhere near there for YouTube purposes, but you don't show we don't show things, do we? You try and keep everything top secret, what have you, but
right.
As a planet, way back when, NASA said, you know what? Let's just chuck all his cards and let's just show them exactly where we are and what we're about. Boom. Do you think that was a good idea? I mean, we're coming to the end of the show, but I've always wanted to ask that to somebody who works with NASA.
So I have no idea how that decision was made, okay, or who made it. I know there was obviously a lot of people who were a fan of it, and people like you who may be a little dubious about why we did that. But I'm personally hopeful that if we encounter a race who has mustered the wherewithal, the technical prowess, etc., to leave their solar system and be able to pick up our signal or be able to find our spacecraft, that they'll be benevolent, just because they had to have figured out some level of cooperation in order to get to that point. Otherwise, they would have destroyed themselves and never gotten to that point. So that's my general opinion on it. You could also go with the other idea that they just had a worldwide empire that ruled with an iron fist, and that's how they got all the the channeled energy in order to be able to do that. And I guess to some extent we saw how the Soviet Union, for instance, was able to do sort of that with channeling their energy. But I think the first scenario is much more likely that
I would agree with that. Yeah,
the civilization on said planet would have had to figure out how to coexist, or they would have ceased to exist.
But it's possible that there may be a very selfish or a civilization out there that would care more about its people than any other planet and just have no empathy for anything else out there and just think, you know what, we're greedy bastards.
It's a pretty common science fiction trope, for sure.
Let's take exactly what we need.
Yeah, I was going to say just then that it's a very human thing to do, is to implant empathy on like possible other races. We tend to project human traits onto these things, and there's no real reason why any of our traits would be found in other civilizations.
Well, here's another consideration.
But you didn't, James. You didn't answer the question.
Well, no, I did. I said. That,
do you think it was? Do you think it was a good idea?
I think it was a good idea. I think it was a good idea.
Do you think we'd do the same now?
Yeah, I would. And because of two things. One, because I do believe that we're going to come across an alien race, and we do, it's going to be benevolent. And number two, it's also very possible that we won't come across this other race ever, but that during our existence, the light of humanity will have long been extinct. But this intrepid spacecraft floating through space might be intercepted. It might end up in orbit around some planet that does have a civilization. And we'll have one marker that said, one day, long, long ago, there was this planet, a beautiful world with all these beautiful people. And they reached out. And that'll be our marker. The last vestiges of humanity.
Got so much good music to listen to as well. Well, not recent music, but way back when.
Pink Floyd.
Yeah, I love a bit of Pink Floyd. Dark Side of the Moon. There you go.
See what I did there?
I see what you did there.
Very
That was
nice.
very clever, my friend. James, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Sure.
And I would love
it's been a blast.
I would
Brilliant.
love to get you on again, and me and Lee were kind of having a back and forth with a little idea. So Lee and I, we've come across in this community some of these people that we call the flat earthers, and we thought what a great idea it would be to get a bunch of NASA guys in to have a just with
Little
me,
friendly
Lee,
debate.
Yeah.
in the middle, just a friendly debate
Okay.
about the shape of the planet.
Well, I guess we'll see if it shapes up.
But I that would be very it would be very, very entertaining. And
I'm
you'd be
certainly game.
There you go.
Awesome.
Honestly, the testicles on these NASA guys, I love it.
Brilliant.
Just don't give a shit. Just don't give a shit. I love it. I love it.
I'm only
And
speaking for myself, so easy enough to do.
Just a couple of whiskeys. Get one of your mates. There you go. Just bring him back to your place. Just come in this room. Sit down. And I'm sure all that he would have to hear is Earth is flat, and he'll be like, "Right, I'm staying here."
There are certainly people who would react that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Brilliant.
Well, people, I want to thank you so much for coming on. It has been beautiful. I mean, it's been nothing like the actual thumbnail of the video, so that's more work for me to do. That's your fault, James. But no, I'm glad we didn't. I'm glad it's Dave's fault. Black Star, it's your fault, mate. Almo,
I bring
Almo.
chaos, man. I bring
You
chaos.
do. You just like last minute. I've got a NASA guy. He wants to. I'm going to get him on. Okay. Does he know about Blue Beam? No.
It means we can do another Blue Beam episode.
There
So
you go.
We'll savor that
it's
thumbnail.
free content.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. What does
Fair
he
enough.
think of it? Oh, yeah, there you go. Wilcott. Do you know David James?
Yeah.
You do know David Wilcott?
No, I don't think so.
He's look him up. He's making a flying car. But without further ado, I'm going to let you. Yes, he's got a hanger and everything. I'm going to let you. I'm going to drop you guys down below, and I will speak to you after the show. Okay.
All right. Live long
Thank
and
you.
prosper, gentlemen.
See ya.
I can't do.
Ciao.
That. As far as it goes. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Black Star Paranormal, get your channel sorted. Can't wait to see it. When's it coming?
They're still. Oh, I think they actually have everything built out. We just haven't turned everything on.
Well, it's not in the description because I can't put anything there.
Well, yeah. I mean, we're still sorting through our old video. I mean, we're not a UFO channel. We're just, just here. We're
You
paranormal
said the
channel.
community. You said the community is toxic.
Oh, it is. Yeah, this one, absolutely.
That's why I fit in so well.
That's why I'm here.
And Lee,
Yeah.
what you got planned next?
More podcasts. I think there's another War Room to go up this weekend. Obviously, the Alien Addict stuff's going up. We'll be recording again, I think, this weekend, won't we? Or this week at some point, hopefully.
This week,
Yeah.
We've only got 2 days left of this
All right.
week.
Okay. Next. Oh, you fucking prick. You know what I meant.
I possibly could. I'll ask the wife. Okay.
There
I'll
you go.
see
There you go. Unfortunately, what you were saying before about what will happen with your show is now young Ollie in the future gets to hear someone call his dad a prick because you were being facetious. So there
yeah.
you go.
Probably gonna have a word with me tomorrow because I did send a message to say you need to watch this show. Dad, you'll love it.
I hope he turns out to be a time traveler, and tomorrow, after we've recorded this show tonight, he turns up from the future. Goes, do you know what, Dad? You are a prick. Lee's right, and then hops back in his spare time travel machine and fucks back to the future.
Thank you, Lee. Rich,
Yeah, mate.
you got a UFO channel.
I know.
It's in the description.
How did that happen?
People go check it out. He has a UFO channel.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah, one video.
But you speak about the physics.
Yeah. I have to wait for an idea, and then I have to get it out quick before it dies of loneliness. So we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, mate, you don't have to rushed content is bad content. That's what I do a show once a week. That's why it's bad. I have no. Last minute, I put a thumbnail up, Project Bluebeam. Not even a show about Project Bluebeam. and normally I'm a little bit half cut at the end of it from having 5 beers. So don't do that either. But Rich, go check his channel out. It is in the description below. And he's my good friend, and it'll mean a lot to me. Thank you, Rich. James, I want to thank you so much for coming on tonight. It means a lot. I'm going to show him. If my dad has not already watched this tonight, I will be showing him it tomorrow and saying, "Are you proud, Daddy? Are you proud?" And he'll say no. He'll say no. You asked him no scientific questions. You just asked him about UFOs and stuff like that. So he'll be disappointed either way. But I want to thank you. It's been great having you on. I'm going to drop you down below. You don't have a channel, do you, by the way? No, none of you NASA guys have a channel. Book?
Well, no, that's not true, but I don't. No books.
No books? No. Spare
I do some outreach sometimes, but I haven't done anything like that.
You can't send me a piece of the International Space Station over like a screw?
I don't have one. If I did, I don't know that I would part with it, but if I did part with it, I would send it to you.
Oh. Means the world. Well, just a screw. That's all I want. Nothing else.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, my friend. What a show! I didn't expect that. You expected Bluebeam, but I brought you NASA. He didn't know much about Bluebeam, and why would he? But people, thank you so much. Everybody in the chat, lively as ever. Go check out the links in the description. They are there. I think Rich has already started. He's probably going to send me a message saying, what you gone over for, Ollie? That's not fair. And it's not. But we had a NASA guy on. He was fun. I enjoyed it. Go check out the merch, people. It's there in the description below. If you want to buy yourself a t-shirt, a mug, do me a favor if you do buy them, because a few of you are buying them, but I'm not getting any pictures on I want a picture of you with a t-shirt or a mug or whatever. And obviously there is the Patreon. You can check that out. Become a Patreon. It's all the tiers are the same now. You can donate whatever it is, $1 or whatever, or anything up to $10. It's all the same tier. You all get the same thing. But I can't be bothered to do extra work. So good night, God bless. Mind the bugs, don't bite. I'm Alien Addict. Like, share, and subscribe.